Hey everybody, I'm so excited to have Brienne Hennessy here. She kind of fell into my world and perfect time because I'm realizing how much I need her. She is a certified and licensed speech voice pathologist and vocal empowerment coach. She has 13 years of experience in her practice, and she's the owner of Your Vocal Vitality. She also has a really good Facebook group called Empower Your Voice and a coaching program to go with that called Empower Your Voice. She helps women speak more authentically, but also just to care for their voice, which I'm realizing she watched my first episode where I lost my voice, like barely into it. And she's like, I can help you. So I'm excited to talk about that. And for women who you say use their voice for their jobs more than 75% of the time, need you. I use it very little and I still need you. So I think we all do. I was thinking about this before we started, how important it is right now to be not only courageous when we speak, but to be heard and to feel, to not feel any fear about being heard or how we come across our presentation or anything. So welcome.
Thank you, Beth. This is such an honor and so fun. I was of course telling you moments ago that to be able to see you in person and do this, virtually, of course, is just so great. So thank you for the invitation.
Yes. Thank you for being here.
Yeah.
Oh, so tell me, I'm curious, whenever I meet somebody and they tell me what they do, I'm always really curious about why and what brought them to it and why they're passionate about it. Like, I picture you as having a big background in singing and theater, but I'm probably just making that up. You tell me how you ended up here.
Yeah, no, thank you. It's not too far off. I think most in my profession tend to have some sort of singing knowledge, but it's certainly not a requirement. Yes, have been just a recreational singer, since I was little, and then in choirs throughout high school. I ended up actually traveling with a group called Up With People, and did that for a year after high school and was part of the backup singing group, and then continued. I still sing to this day, and of course, as we know, singing will be in groups on hold for a while. But my interest actually was very roundabout. Believe it or not, I did not actually know what a speech pathologist was until I was in college. And I had decided that I wanted to be a marine biologist because that was like the cool thing to do then. Who didn't want to work with dolphins and swim in the ocean and things like that? So I had actually ended up going to the University of Victoria in British Columbia in Canada, and at that time was really interested in all the things related to marine biology until we got down to like the nitty gritty of like cells and science, and I was like, I don't know if this is for me. And in the meantime, I was taking a linguistics course. It was just kind of a language always interested me, and words and things of that nature. And I loved it. And I discovered that there was actually a degree in linguistics. And so fast forward like a couple courses later, I'm in a class where we are talking about how sound is shaped, how we make sound as humans, how you can quantify that and look at that in different sound waves and waveforms. I mean, now with the digital age, people can edit their podcasts and things of that nature, know what waveforms are. And so this was really fascinating to me. And I knew I loved things related to communication and voice because of the singing aspect, but I also knew that I wanted to be, I think of it kind of on the sidelines. Like I knew I wasn't going to be like someone, singing up front or doing anything, in that kind of realm, but more helping people from that periphery. And so I was in one of our labs and I saw this sign for a vocology class and a vocology course, and it was based in Denver at the time. And I thought, vocology, that's when I'm reading about it. And it's talking about like the science of voice and how we make sounds and how you can learn about what the voice, is capable of and all of these different things. And then at the end, I noticed the instructors had these letters behind their names, CCC, SLP. And I was like, what is that? So it all just kind of led from there. It was kind of very roundabout. But something just drew me to it. I actually had already done some projects related to voice in undergrad. And from there, I was hooked, and I went ahead and decided which graduate programs I wanted to apply to. I was very fortunate to get into one of the top programs for voice at the University of Iowa, and went there. And from there on, just knew that helping in the realm of voice from the speech pathology sense is a very specialized niche, but it means that you can take an injured voice and rehabilitate it, and that there are such significant numbers of people who, whether for their profession or not, experience something beyond laryngitis, experience something beyond a communication disruption, not because they can't pronounce the words, not because they've had a head injury, not because they've had a stroke, but because their voice is disrupted. And so that's kind of been my my passion and my path for the last 13 years. And I love it. Like it's just, voice to me is just this very cool instrument that most of us take for granted, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, unless we lose our voice, we're like, I just wake up and talk, So yeah.
No, that's so fascinating. I would have been just like you, because I love dolphins in the water too, and then I would have been bored with the cells and biology. But I love that you can pay attention to like the waveform and the different ways that we make sound. And I just saw on a show my kid was watching the other day, like I think it's Alexander Graham Bell's. He has like this chart of how your tongue and stuff goes.
Yes.
I'm like, I didn't even know that you could map out how
Yes.
sound, like what sound should be. So I'm sure you could take someone like me, and I've shared with you, I'm really soft spoken. I hold all my tension in my throat. I don't talk correctly. And I'm sure you could probably be like, this is why, and this is what you need to do.
Yeah, it's essentially a diagnosis in a way, and not that has to have any weight or ill intent to it. It's just kind of assessing what's going on. I assess, I listen. Yes, the sound charts are great. There's all the vowels are mapped out. I could tell you based on what vowel you're making, where your tongue is shaped, and how each of the consonants in English are made. And when a sound is, for example, like stuck up in the nose, I can tell you why that is versus like when it's in the throat. And so there's all these different components that come from this output, right? From this instrument that actually requires some significantly coordinated, repetitive, fascinating movements just to do what we do. And you know what's interesting about that, Beth? Because people are somewhat, like on the one hand, fascinated because of the beautiful like sounds we get from performers, and all the way to tribal chants, all the way to a client and I today were talking about Gregorian chanting and Mongolian throat singing. Like there's so many levels of how we use this, right, to make these cool sounds. And yet at the same time, I think there's something to that idea that when something starts to go a little awry, do we pay attention to it? Or if it starts to go awry and it doesn't bother us, when is that threshold that the function is impaired and we go, I don't know, something's not quite right, So I'm often encouraging people that it's one of those things to be mindful of, be aware of, and don't be afraid to speak up about it. Because like you said, people may be fearful to speak their minds in certain ways, but not necessarily be aware of how the actual instrument they're using to do that could be helping them or hindering them. And I say that just because of the bias that can come for voices that don't sound quote unquote typical, or don't sound normal. So yeah.
Oh, I have so many questions now. But that's so important to speak up, because I've actually had problems with this for a long time, and it's caused conflict in my marriage because he's like, you're mumbling, I can't hear you.
The mumbling thing. Hey, okay. When that happens, how does it make you feel? When
I feel like it takes a lot of energy to even speak to him. So then if he can't hear it, then I'm like, oh my God, now I got to do it all over again. It feels like it's a lot. I don't know.
And does that feel like it collects anywhere physically, that energy? Do you notice that it lands anywhere? For example, like you mentioned earlier, like you feel like it's in the throat. Do you feel like that kind of collects in the throat, or do you feel just kind of a general stuckness with that by chance?
It definitely is in my throat. It
Yeah.
feels like I hold tension there, and
Yeah.
I also, from one of your videos, learned how to breathe. Had no idea the diaphragm was a piston and going up and down instead of like out and in.
Yeah.
So I've been
Yeah.
trying to match my voice to my out breath and stuff. I'm like, oh God, I did it before we connected. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I sound like Chewbacca when I do it, like that breathing thing. I'm like,
That's
clearly
fantastic.
I
Yeah.
need help. So
But
this,
you were exploring that. Like, can
yeah.
we just take a moment to acknowledge that, Beth? Like the fact that you were exploring it and willing to say, you know what, my voice is evolving, my voice is changing, and there are some weird sounds that I can make and things to do, but that you tried it, you know? Like I just think that's so fantastic.
Oh,
So
thank you.
that's awesome. Yeah.
Well, I'm realizing how important it is that people can hear me and I can go out and speak my
Yeah.
opinions or help others. And it's such a powerful thing, like you've shared,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
it's a tool we have. And you talk a lot
Mm-hmm.
about caring for it. And I
Mm-hmm.
learned all kinds of things from your Facebook group. I've got like throat coat tea or something back there,
Oh,
and
yes.
drinking
Great.
water.
Cheers. Yeah, that's what I'm drinking.
Right? This is
Mhm.
actually delicious. I was like, this
It
is not sugar.
it is.
It's wonderful.
No, it's pretty good.
Yeah. But
Yeah, so there
how
are things to care for it. That's true. And yet to your point, being heard is two sides of the coin, right? And you've brought up both sides. It's the physical aspect of, can I project my voice? Can I not be, told I'm mumbling? And and that's interesting because you and I actually have that in common. I've often been told, which you're going to laugh because you're like, you're a speech pathologist. I've been told I mumble.
Oh, really?
And people, yes. And at the time, like especially a few years ago and before that, um I figured, well, sometimes I'm a fast talker, sure. Or I figured, you know what, maybe I didn't preface the conversation, or I sometimes forget to bring in the content, for like the context, excuse me, first. So then people are like, wait, what?
Yeah.
But then it occurred to me that at least in some cases, the mumbling is sometimes the volume, and that sounds like a little bit of what you're experiencing. And sometimes the feeling of less than, or not feeling willing to be assertive. And so then we have to look at, okay, if we're physically feeling this sense of uncertainty for bringing up a conversation or talking about something, and maybe not right at first, maybe it seems like the most natural thing to talk about, but if there's something that is not willing to be said, the breath can get restricted. When the breath is restricted, the voice goes down, and when the voice goes down, the sound goes down, so it sounds a little more like it's kind of stuck and mumbly. This is extreme. This is not how you sound, but
Okay.
it is interesting to think about, where is that out of alignment? So is it what you're saying that you're feeling, you generally saying, that feels uncomfortable, or like you're not going to be heard, like that person isn't going to be willing to listen to the important message you have to say? And how does your body physically react to that? Do you kind of then bring everything down and just kind of stay here?
Mm,
Perhaps.
yeah.
Or are you a softer talker naturally, and that is okay? Lots of natural soft talkers. And in that realm, is it just the constant, like, I can't hear you, I can't physically hear you, I can't, that just gets tiresome, right? And exhausting. And so you have to kind of gauge, which situation am I going to put forth that energy? And then am I replenishing myself to do it again and again and again?
Uh,
Yeah. So those are the two sides that I thought of when you were sharing that. And that's the work, that's the exploration, you
oh,
know? And so I offer both of those aspects so people can be more in alignment with their voice.
oh, do you? Okay.
Yeah.
That's good that you
Yeah.
tie it together, because I'm curious. Oh gosh, still so many questions. Let me just get the one out of my mind real quick. Do
Of
you
course.
think that voice issues are the result of something that happens to us as like children? Are we just born with them?
Oh, that's a great
Or
question.
is it just something that we kind of start, and if somebody doesn't recognize it, then it gets worse? Where do you think they
Mm,
start?
that's a great question. So if we stay fully in the realm of the idea of voice disorders, the things that in my speech and voice pathology side of my role, um, when we identify what constitutes a voice disorder, how did it start? We look at all the risk factors and then what could have contributed and how can we rehabilitate that. Um, yes, there are pediatric or childhood voice disorders that are very common.
Mhm.
Um, a lot of them have to do with too much, too loud, too often.
Mm,
Kids just having that ability to be noisemakers on many many levels, whether it's becoming the engine for the train that they're like growling that they're playing with,
mhm,
or having a family dynamic that just louder families exist, and so they're constantly competing to be heard and tend to raise their voices. So that's one of a few different common childhood kind of voices um, that can turn into an issue and turn into hoarseness and turn into that child then being, 3 rows back in the classroom and the teacher's constantly like, I can't hear you, speak up, because their voice is so raspy and scratchy. Um, but then we have to think about, yes, I had a client recently who we were working through some of the breath work and warming up her voice a little bit. And she paused and she goes, I'm noticing that when I'm doing this and it's starting to flow, that sounds better to me. That feels better to me. But that doesn't mean that I'm being heard for who I am. And I think that's been going along for a long time. So
mm,
it brought her back to periods decades before where she felt like, yeah, I was the kid who was constantly like shushed. I was the kid who was constantly like, no, we don't need to hear that right now. So then you have to wonder, right? To your point, does it start in childhood? For some, yeah, I think so. And I think then we have to think about that connection of how our mind body interaction absorbs those kind of messages and whether or not it truly is healed or released, or it truly does end up mm, interfering with some of our um, kind of ways of staying well and staying healthy.
mhm,
So there's a lot of times that I feel like the voice disorders that we see in children, while we try to both rehabilitate with exercises, we're also trying to educate the families about it as
mm,
well.
mm.
Um, but it's too soon to know, right? Until you're hearing it from the child's mouth later, whether or not it's also a combination of how they are respected, heard in the family dynamic, you
Oh,
know?
yeah.
So yeah, it's kind of a bit of both that way. So I do think they can start younger. I also think it truly can depend on the level of trauma, and lots of different ways that trauma can show up as a voice disorder as well.
Oh,
So
wow. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Oh, both of those points I have some experience with because I had like the brother
Mm,
who told me to shut up all the time, more so him than my parents. But then
okay.
now I have the loudest husband in the world who's constantly making noise. So it's like I can't even compete. So I'm just not even gonna bother. But
Right.
oh
So
my
how does that feel like? Um, does that feel like it still interferes with what you want to say though, like the words and the message you want to bring to the table?
it does because it makes me
Okay.
angry and then I say different words.
Okay.
Like,
So then,
yeah, right? Like, if you just be quiet, you
right.
just listen. Um,
Right. Like when I am talking, you need to not be talking.
yeah.
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah. No, absolutely. I appreciate you sharing that because are two very even just one of those things would make someone feel like they cannot stand up for themselves. And then the literal stopping, the physical like I wanted to say something, and that holds tension, that holds tightness.
mm,
Then you pile the anger, tightness, restriction of the breath on top of that. And yeah, that could definitely feel like it's just this um, culmination of things.
yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, do you feel like there are phrases or words or ways now you get the family's attention. Like if you're like, excuse me, I'm going to be talking now. Like, have you played around with that at all?
No, but that's a great idea. I feel like I
Okay.
need a
Yeah.
bell or something. Hello.
So great. So great. Yes. So yeah, play around with it for your family there. Who knows that you can get super creative and fun with it and be like, you know what, when you hear this, mom needs to say something, or this is time where we all, what was it used to, like, you pass the like shell or something, whoever the shell gets the talk kind of thing.
Right. I
A
need
bell
that.
is a great way. I did have someone once who took it a little too literally and got like a mini air horn for his family. No, I wouldn't recommend that for the anger side of things that you
I know.
mentioned.
Oh, I feel that some days. Oh, that's
Yeah.
funny.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, that's
Mm,
all good to know. I always like to look at the root cause of things. And I think it's so
yeah.
important that we pay attention to when we silence our kids and how well we listen to them and how we
Yeah.
create time for everybody to speak. So thank you so much for talking about that for me and
Absolutely.
humoring me for a minute. You
Yes.
in your group about the importance of water, and you said on one of my videos that I sounded dry. Like,
Yeah.
how does that affect our voice?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we'll do a brief little anatomy 101. The vocal folds themselves, so they sit behind our Adam's apple. They are a layered structure. So they have muscle at the bottom, they have a ligament, and then they have these three layers of very, very thin, kind of jelly, watery like uh, cells that then create this vibration when air goes through them. So as they're vibrating, think of it like if you had very well lubricated um, uh, two pieces of tissue come together, they're well lubricated, they are just going to smoothly, easily flow and vibrate. As soon as there's any dryness to it, as soon as there's any stickiness to it, that vibration becomes disrupted.
Mm.
And sometimes it's enough just to cause a little tickle. Oh, I feel a little scratch. Sometimes it's enough that then the output, the sound starts to sound dry, like what you were mentioning. And unfortunately, because the vocal folds, for example, in women, when we're speaking like you and I are now, we're vibrating our vocal folds about 180 times a second.
Wow.
So we've already vibrated them hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of times in one day. So if you think of that as friction, constant just friction that they can tolerate to a point, but if there's no lubrication, can you imagine like rubbing your hands together
Mm.
for that long or that many times and having that kind of impact? So that's where the idea of keeping them lubricated. Now, to your question about water. Water is going to be immensely helpful for health, just period. So let's just start there. Staying hydrated helps the major organs, on up. Staying hydrated keeps your energy up. Staying hydrated keeps you from as much brain fog, that kind of sensation. We have no evidence, though, to know how much water someone should drink in order for it to help that lubrication in the vocal folds. And that's because we don't have the science yet to explain how it is that it finally ends up getting to this organ, the larynx in our
Mm.
neck. However, when someone is underhydrated, when you are, say, my clients who are like, just come back from Arizona and are in Madison, they're like, yeah, no, my voice was not great in Arizona. My voice was great in
Really?
Florida, but not great in Arizona. Like there's
Oh,
differences in that because of the dryness. But if they themselves are underhydrated, that is going to start that cycle of the tissue not being well lubricated.
oh wow.
So when it comes to water, a lot of myths abound. It's something in our little voice community that we just kind of both want to find out more, but it's frustrating because we can't go poking and prodding in live people, to try to figure out what's going on. So
Darn.
so it's all kind of like a secondary way of the science, and the researchers who are doing the science in the labs. However, I would say it's important to know that everybody's individual. Drinking water to the point that you no longer feel thirst is a great baseline. Don't buy into the myths of 8 glasses a day or pee clear or half your body weight in ounces, because unfortunately that is going to be so individual, right? Like the amount of water I need versus what you need could be wildly different. And sometimes that's even just based on health conditions and medications, you know, each person has, which is interesting. So I always encourage people to try to set themselves a goal. So say, for example, if you are at, you know, 2 water bottles a day, let's say those like 20-ounce water bottles, start there. Okay. And then see over the course of a few days if you can play with increasing that. You may start to notice that, yeah, actually I can get that down no problem. And I feel better and better, or I'm not running out of running into the dryness or feeling fatigued. The voice can fatigue faster when we're drier, because again, it goes back to that systemic lack of hydration. And I think it's one of those things that I hear so many people say, but I don't like water. I'm like, you can flavor it. you can drink tea. Tea is okay. And so it's one of those things where you've got to experiment with yourself. I had an elite singer that I was working with, and she even surprised herself. This is someone whose degree relies on her staying in top shape. And she came in one day and she's like, you know, she had already done like her workout for the day and was hydrated. She thought from that, she's like, this past week, I upped my entire intake per day by, I think for her, it was like a certain amount in her water bottle amount. And she was like, I am on fire. I am feeling great. I mean, and she had been thinking she was already at her peak level. Wow. So I encourage people to just really be open-minded about like that sense for, remember, the water has a lot of bigger organs to help you stay alive to like go to first. So give yourself the, you know, curiosity of saying, well, what if I increase it today? And how would my voice feel by the end of the day? Because it takes 12 to 24 hours for that water to even get through our system. So the water you did or didn't drink 2 days ago is how your voice is going to feel today. So, oh my God. Yeah, I know. Well, I try to, as you can tell, that's a myth I really try to bust. So I'm very passionate about that one.
That is really good to know. And I feel like now I got so thirsty while you were talking, and I'm like, now I need like a water.
Keep sipping. You go for it. I want you go for it.
And now everybody's also going to want like toilets in their offices because we'll be going.
Right? It's so funny to me that, I mean, but I get it. People, that's also a very common thing. People say, well, then I'm going to go to the restroom more. And I'm like, but that's toxins out of your body. Like, is that a problem? Like, so it's very interesting because people are worried about that. They're worried that, well, how would I drink that much? And then, oh man, I'm going to have to go to the bathroom. And I'm like, that's a normal process though. But I get it. Some jobs, some places don't allow for, you know, there's just not that time built in. And so that's where I try to help people be strategic and individualized with how they can keep their water maintained, because yeah, that's a lot of what people worry about. But you know, what's something to think about with that too, Beth, I find is fascinating. Our bodies want to be at an equilibrium, you know? Okay. And so I think there is a state where think of it like you might feel like you're going overkill only for then it to kind of balance out. You know, okay. So even with things like how much you're ingesting versus, you know, how much you might be, you know, letting loose, it calibrates itself, I should say, to what your body needs. So that's something to think about too with it.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Yeah. So drink until you no longer feel thirst. Give yourself a day or two to even adjust to begin.
Adjust. Exactly. Yeah.
Can we just buy like lube for our throat, or does it have to be pure water?
That's a great question. Oh my gosh, I love that question. Oh, would that be, man, can we just make that like our $1 million idea right now? Like,
there you go. Let's make it.
Let's do. So the interesting like thing about that is the water is not touching the vocal folds. So that's the other piece that I think, which I understand is kind of confusing because people think it's all one tube, but the swallow tube and the breathing tube are separate. And I know saying that out loud, you're probably like, well, yeah, because you know, if you go drink water too fast and it goes down the wrong way, we've all been there. That doesn't feel good. So the water itself never touches physically the vocal folds. However, to the point of being lubricated, there is benefit from things like being in a steamy shower. Mm-hmm. Breathing in steam that is small enough particles that when you breathe that in, it does go over that space and that tissue. Oh. So then it is kind of like a lubricant in its own way, so that it can feel less of that friction And the studies show even less vocal fatigue for people who steamed before long talking. So before your next long talking conversation, you
Can
can
I use
steam.
like one of those little face steamer
Absolutely. One of
things?
my favorite ones to use. Yes. Get
Oh,
the facial, get the voice lubricated. It's a 2-for-1. It's
I've
great.
never thought of that. That's awesome. I'm gonna have to do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Do. I mean, it's kind of, I mean, for all the definitely not quick fixes that I am not a believer in, steaming feels better. Like as soon as you do it, for most people, they're like, oh yeah, that's nice. So yeah, I
Okay.
definitely,
I'm
yeah,
gonna do
I
that.
want you to try that one. Let me know how that one goes.
So you just said that the water doesn't pass through because they're in the windpipe, but on
Hmm.
masterclass, Christina Aguilera talked about how she uses like I think it was like a packet of honey, like ripped open,
Yeah.
like while she's singing, or also cough drops. So what did those
Hmm.
actually do for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's a lot of anecdotal ways that speakers and singers can just feel for some relief. So like you mentioned with the throat coat tea,
Mhm.
that tea is going into the esophagus, not passing, past the vocal folds into the windpipe. However, the soothing properties of that already start to lubricate the other tissues up in the back of the throat,
Uh,
up around the mouth, the places that also dryness, sometimes we think it's down here, but in actuality it's the rest of the throat and the rest of the mouth. So honey is a big popular one. Yeah, some people take it straight, shoot it straight, and some people put it in their tea. Cough drops, I'm a little hesitant with those, only because often the menthol masks the actual sensation. And we all know what that feels like. You have a sore throat, please, yes, take the menthol because you are burning and on fire. But once that goes away, you don't need the menthol to keep kind of masking those sensations. You want to be aware of them. So things like, there are cough drops, I wouldn't call them cough drops. There are lozenges that don't have menthol, things like one by Luden's.
okay.
Halls actually has one now called Breezers, and they have no menthol, and those have pectin, and pectin can feel lubricating. And so yes, when people are feeling like they've overdone it or need to have that extra quote unquote layer of feeling soothed, great, by all means. There's even differences between, some people love having something cold
Mhm.
after they've done a lot of voicing, and other people swear by their hot liquids. So to me, I'm always do what you feel is most soothing and do it often.
Mhm.
um, and as long as it's not dangerous, then we're great.
Right.
So yeah,
Not dangerous. Okay.
yeah,
So no menthol.
yeah.
I know she mentioned that she does like hot tea before she sings and then
Hmm.
ice cold water when she's done. I can't even
Hmm.
imagine what that feels like to sing for that long.
Right,
I would die.
right. That's a whole nother kind of marathon with
Right?
the voice.
Oh my gosh. And
Yeah.
dance. Like, phew.
Yes. I know.
Crazy.
I know some of the moves, and then when you realize they're not using backing tracks, you're like, "That's impressive." That's very impressive.
It
Some people can't
is.
even like take a walk with their friend down the street without feeling like and talking with them.
I
So
know.
yeah,
I would
yeah, it's
I
wild.
look up to everybody that can do that. It's amazing to me. Um, so how do you prevent vocal injury besides these things are all great? Do we need
Yeah.
to like work out,
Mm.
do like a warm up for our voice? That kind
In my biased view, yes, and that's primarily because we can't predict who's going to get a voice disorder. Let's just say, if we just took 100 voices, looked at them with a scope, we wouldn't necessarily be able to predict. We have to look at the factors of how they use it, any other risk factors from health conditions, and then even then, I would not be able to predict for you why um, the cheerleader down the street who's been doing it professionally never has a voice issue, and yet the teacher who just started her first job 2 weeks ago is struggling and can't
Mhm.
even get through the workday. Unfortunately, the science isn't there yet. So we have to look at, how can we treat this preventatively? So the same way that you would take care of your body, the same way, and that goes back to why I kind of put it at this about 75%, let's say, in a day, or or in a way that you use your voice that does require these long, longer periods, the voice demands that you have, and the efficiency with which you're using it may be totally mismatched. If you're not using your voice efficiently, even if you have lower amount of voicing you have to do, you might feel just as derailed as the person who is talking 100% of their day and just can't get through. So those are vocal athletes. I mean, that's truly how we have to start thinking about this. So I am a big proponent of being preventative with it, taking it in as an instrument that is really taking on a lot of stress and strain throughout the day. And we do just kind of like cruise along. So I'm a big advocate of warming up in the morning. The shower is a great place to do it because then you get the steam. See, then you got both going on. So warming up the voice. And this can be anything. This can be little humming ditties. People are always like, but I can't sing. That's okay. This is not about singing. This is taking this lovely little sound that we as humans can make, and creating that space for it to just kind of start to feel good, sound good, know what our natural voice sounds like. Not everybody talks at their natural voice spot. They think they are, but there's definitely people, I can tell you, are not at their natural voice spot. So I think it's really imperative that we do warm-ups. And I guess I would say, so like, so if you thought about like doing warm-ups in your day, like when you first like would hear that, like, does that make you go like, no, I don't want to do that. Like, that would be weird. Or does it make you feel like it's just one more thing to add in your day? Like, how would that sit with you, do you think?
I know. I feel like I'm trying to fix something, so I'm a little bit more motivated to figure it out. And by the way, I'm pretty sure I don't talk where my natural voice is. I love you said that, because I know you did a trick in one of your lives that you did, and you're like, hum this way, and then you'll know where it is. And I need to go back and find it because that was so interesting. But
shall we do it right now? What do you think? We don't have to.
I pretty much just sound like Chewbacca when I hum. I don't know what that's about. I perfected that one.
If you would like, open space, but yes.
I'll do it now. Why not?
Okay. You want to try? Okay.
Sure.
So those of you listening to, do it along with us, honestly, because some people have never just paused to just go, hey, I can make this very simple sound, but notice a lot of things. Okay. So I just want you to hum like you're doing a sigh. So like it's been a long day. And again. This time you're going to start it even just a little bit higher, not like stratosphere, but like a slide. One more time like that.
Okay.
There, that middle section, that was your more natural voice.
Really?
So when you're playing around with this, two things that you can be attuned to. Start listening to where the smoothness, and it may stay smooth the whole time, and that's great, but there may be, for some of you, places that the smoothness really locks in. And for yours, Beth, then it resonated out here. The sound was not that throat sound. It had much more of just kind of a presence and a fullness to it. And so listening for the smoothness, and then feeling if it feels comfortable. Like after humming a few times, if everything's in alignment physically, it should feel pretty comfortable to do. Like almost like we were talking about warm-ups, but almost like a little relief, from the day. So yeah.
That is so cool. I'm excited.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And that voice right there, that was more your natural voice.
It's a lot higher than I normally am.
I get that a lot. Yeah, it is, because, and that could be a whole nother conversation for lots of reasons. I believe in our society, females have been taught subconsciously or otherwise to lower their voice to sound more authoritative. And I think if you add that to that idea of not feeling like you're worthy of being heard, it's a tough combination. So the voice kind of drops in both volume and pitch. So I think a lot of women actually talk lower than where it would be natural for them. So
I've kind of hurt myself going down more. That's interesting.
Yeah. So yeah, thank you for being willing to do that.
Thank you. That was
Yeah.
awesome. I
Yeah.
feel like I've sucked in helium now, though. It just feels weird
It,
to be
it
higher.
it's got, yes, it's going to feel different because partially it's a voice that now your ears like, wait, what is this?
Mhm.
So your brain's trying to register it. And then partially because now you're actually vibrating it in a different part of your body.
Oh my God.
When you vibrated here down in the throat, you know how we were talking about the sound waves earlier?
Mhm.
Physically, the sound waves get stuck here. And now the sound waves are actually up into your face, your nose, places that you're like, oh, well, that's new. So
So
it's,
weird. How
yeah,
cool.
yeah, it can feel very weird. Some people are very like, ooh, that's kind of tickly. Like sometimes it like buzzes.
Oh my God.
So yeah, yeah. So
Thank you.
that's really, really natural for you to be able to like attune to that. That's awesome, awesome intuition with that.
Mm,
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
This has been so fun. I do have one more
Yeah.
question for you
Sure
because
thing.
so many of my lovely people care about parenting and our children.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, after hearing all this, if there's anything special that I know you have a daughter. Do you
Yeah, I
have a
do. She's 8, well, almost 9.
okay.
Yeah.
Do you have just the daughter or more?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Is there anything special that you do with her to teach her to
Mm.
take care of her voice?
She has the um pleasure of watching me warm up my voice. So she's kind of taken on some of the things. But
Oh,
I will say, we do like to like sing around the house and do different kind of noises. Like for example, lip trills. Some of you may be familiar with these, but just silly noises like that, and a lot of like playful noises. And so we'll do those kind of things, but more so, it's nothing particular for her to have to do on a regular basis.
mhm.
Um, More when it comes to I've helped her I should rephrase, I've helped her become aware of when she feels like her own voice is tired.
Ah,
Like, because even kids can feel a drain and they may not end up having that hoarse quality I was mentioning earlier, like an actual change to the sound,
mhm.
but they describe, she'll describe when it just feels physically tired. And again, that goes back to, this is a very powerful and resilient instrument, but it's not infallible, it needs rest.
Yeah.
So it's more in that realm that I just try to help her become aware. I would encourage parents listening to, often one of the things I'll say to her is, I'm right here, I can hear you. Because they just want to be like, right, they want to just blast their voice out depending on the child, right?
Yeah.
And so there's that too, just helping them become aware how loud, we're talking, not in a ever, and knowing especially with your background, and you and I see eye to eye on a lot of these things from me looking into how conscious parenting really approaches
Mhm.
kids. It's the awareness, and it's the bringing in that sense of like, that is so cool, you're excited about that, and we can be right here. And as a parent, if you're modeling that same, vocal volume, it's present, it is energized, then it gives the child that much more understanding that there is a safe space to still be heard.
Oh,
So those are the kind of things that I think come to mind the most. And I don't feel like, unless a true voice disorder has started, that you have to be super worried about like preventative exercises or anything,
okay.
um, because it's something that I would want someone to pursue on their own. Do you know what I'm saying? Like as they grow older and
Yes.
understanding, like for example, it's not like we're having the kids, you should go out and do your weightlifting or do your
Right.
exercises for your body, because they already naturally do that. You're just helping them bring awareness to what this instrument is, and that they can use it, in a way that is very healthy too.
Mm.
So yeah,
Oh, I love that. I love that.
yeah,
So I love reminding them that you're right there and and
it's
they don't
it's
need
a
to
good one.
yell. And I love
It's a
creating a
good one.
safe space for them. That's so beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Thank you,
definitely.
Brienne. Tell
Yes,
everybody where
thank
they can
you.
find you.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So the two main spots would be I'm on Facebook. You are welcome to follow me there. I have my Empower Your Voice private Facebook group that Beth mentioned that I'm so honored that she is a member of.
Yeah.
And that contains more tips, trainings. And then on Instagram at Your Vocal Vitality. Feel free to follow me there. I would love to see you and reach out anytime in the DMs. I'm always happy to talk about voice.
Lovely. And I know we can sign up for your programs on
Yes.
yourvocalvitality.com.
Yes.
I'm looking forward to talking to you more. Thank you so much for
Yeah,
being with us today.
you're very welcome. Thank you. This was such a pleasure. And I love how it just, the way you intertwine all these facets of family and business. And it just, I just think that's phenomenal. So thank you for showing me what is possible with that.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.